Ebola in West Africa needed to hear, since the VA is the perfect example of how the healthcare system will work once the Affordable Care Act is implemented. And let's not forget, it was errors in the Dallas healthcare system that initially led to the spread of Ebola here in America. Texas is only one of 13 states in the U.S. to have completed CDC training in Ebola diagnosis, verification, and containment. That means there are currently 37 states that are unprepared to respond quickly to a potential Ebola case. And of America's 4 specially equipped so-called Ebola hospitals, a whopping total of 9 patients can be treated at any given time. But none of these facts matter. Put your faith in the system. The state will save you.
I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox Special at InfoWarsLife.com.
Introducing the first proprietary oxygen-based intestinal cleanser, OxyPowder, backed by FDA-approved Phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. All the toxins from the air, the food, the water, ultimately ends up in the gut or affects the gut. Take your health into your own hands and start cleansing your body today with OxyPowder. Secure your OxyPowder today at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com.
Well, the man who refuses to ban transnational flights to stop the spread of Ebola had no problem banning trans fats. As the National Review points out, the CDC's freedom spearheaded New York City's nanny state under Michael Bloomberg. They say, as undisputed captain of former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg's nanny state, he made his political career by lecturing, pressuring, and outright coercing people into making healthy choices. From tobacco to trans fats to table salt, the ex-New York City health commissioner took a Papa Knows Best approach to public health. As they point out, he compelled restaurants to post calorie counts on menus and menu boards in 2006. He pushed a soda tax. In other words, this is a guy who doesn't care about any of your freedoms. And yet he tells us that people have a right to travel. That's not what we see at any of the border crossings, at any of the airports by the TSA. Since when do they respect our rights? Quite frankly, they don't. Now, Walmart is getting into the healthcare business because how hard could it be? I mean, we've seen the wonderful job that's been done in Dallas. Now we're going to have Walmart extend the business, just like all these other big box retailers, of giving people vaccines every time you go into a retail store. Now they're going to start putting clinics in. Walmart is going to charge $40 a doctor visit, but they're not going to be alone. They're going to be joined, they say, by Target, Walgreens, and CVS are all potentially putting in clinics into big box locations. So when you go in, you won't only just be able to get an IV at every retail outlet, you'll also be able to have an emergency room experience. You know, you don't have to go to the emergency room to hang around sick people. You can just go to a big box, one-stop retailer. Now, the Edward Snowden film is coming out next week, Citizen 4. And some clips have been released by people who have seen it in advanced screenings for critics. And this is very telling, what he said about the Obama administration. It begins in the early part of the movie as saying, with a quote from Ed Snowden saying, "I saw the promise of the Obama administration betrayed and walked away from. It really hardened me to action." In other words, his motivation for doing what he did, he said, was the hypocrisy of the Obama administration. So what is Hollywood going to do with their hypocrisy? He's been their guy. They've stuck by him. They're still doing fundraisers for him. Famously, Gwyneth Paltrow's fundraiser a few weeks ago, where there were the posters comparing her to a drone. They have no problem with his drone program. They have no problem with his violation of civil liberties. These are the things, anti-war, civil liberties, these are the things that Hollywood is supposed to care about. What are they going to do with this? Well, we see that the Weinstein Company, the same company that promoted Zero Dark 30 and released it just prior to Obama's reelection, they're going to be the ones who are going to be promoting and releasing Edward Snowden's documentary, Citizen4, done by Laura Poitras. Will they promote it as much as they did Zero Dark 30? Will Hollywood finally walk away from the hypocrisy of the Obama administration as Ed Snowden did? Will America wake up to what's going on and finally care about the consequences? We'll have to see. I'm very anxious to see that documentary. Now, the government wants to study social pollution on Twitter. This is another whistleblowing revelation from the FCC commissioner that earlier alerted us to the surveys, quote unquote, that the FCC wanted to do to radio stations, television stations, and even print newsrooms. The FCC, as well as the federal government, is trying to make a science out of monitoring and shaping public opinion. He had this to say: if you take to Twitter to express your views on a hot button issue, does the government have an interest in deciding whether you're spreading misinformation? If you tweet your support for a candidate in the November elections, should taxpayer money be used to monitor your speech, to evaluate your partisanship? And then he points out that the National Science Foundation is funding a project to collect and analyze Twitter data. It's named Truthy after the term that was coined by TV host Stephen Colbert, and he says that invites feedback on whether specific Twitter users like the Drudge Report are truthy or are they spamming. This is what we've seen over and over again. It's yet another example of science and academia working as the handmaids of tyranny, just as Eisenhower warned us in his military-industrial complex speech. It's very troubling to see this, especially in light of their previous effort to look at content. The FCC was never about content. The FEC was created, its purpose was created to set aside different frequencies, to allocate those frequencies so that there wasn't an overlap. They were never to be concerned about content. We saw them get into that once, and then that was pulled back as the fairness doctrine was repealed. But now they're looking at getting into content in a big way. They're looking at not only seeing what we're doing, but controlling what we're doing. They have allowed the Voice of America and Radio Free Europe. They've removed the protections against them broadcasting in America. They have paved the way for the government to directly broadcast propaganda to you. And of course, the way they want to do that, they need to have metrics to see whether or not that propaganda is effective, to see how your opinion is shaped, to see if they can change it. Now, as the government is monitoring tweets and trying to get a handle on how people form their opinions, we see a local police department requesting Facebook passwords from gun permit applicants. Now, this is a great example of why you don't want to allow your fundamental rights recognized by the supreme law of the land to be turned into privileges. Because now you're not just an applicant, you're a supplicant. Now, they have put on this application, they want not only your Facebook page, but they want your password, which is really strange. It's bad enough that they would look at your Facebook page to determine whether or not you're a worthy applicant. And of course, there's a lot of coercion and intimidation behind this. Now, Robert Farago of NewYorkFirearms.com asked the police department about this, and they said it's a common practice to view social media as a means to identify and determine character of a pistol permit applicant, in addition to other investigatory methods. In other words, you're guilty until they prove that you're innocent or somehow trustworthy. And then he says, when confronted with the fact that this is a violation of your fundamental rights, the police chief said, well, it is what it is. And he said, if you decline, such information is no doubt handed up to the judge, who will decide yes or no on your application. And as Kit Daniels points out, they're strong-arming, they're intimidating people into having their First, their Second, and their Fourth Amendment rights violated. You have the right to be secure in your person and your papers, and you have a right to say whatever you want to politically. And you have a right to protect yourself with firearms. That is something that separates us from every other country. Look at where this will lead if we don't support the Second Amendment. We see that a Japanese man has now been sentenced to 2 years in prison for printing a 3D gun. The judge called it a heinous crime, and he said this. He said, the man was attempting to emasculate the country's strictly enforced gun laws. It's the Japanese laws that are emasculating the Japanese public. This goes back to their Japan's Swords and Firearms Control Act. Swords. They have sword control. They have knife control. Now, the Japanese man who's been sentenced to prison, the 28-year-old man, his name is Imura, he really understands what is at risk here. Here are some quotes that he said. "Freedom of armaments to all people. A gun makes power equal." Absolutely. Everyone knows that power comes out of the barrel of a gun, as Chairman Mao said. Only in America have we trusted the population to own guns as a check to the abuse of power. That's what it's there for. It's not about hunting. It's about checking the abuse of power. The judge said this was a heinous crime because, he said, he intended to demonstrate that firearms could be manufactured easily and publicize that fact widely over the internet. And it was also, I think, heinous because he told people about their fundamental human right that everyone has to protect themselves against criminals, against criminal governments. Well, that's it for our news tonight. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. And if you're not a subscriber to Prison Planet TV, please consider subscribing and supporting our operation here. Your subscription funds our operation, funds our reporters, and you can share that with up to 11 people at the same time, viewing the news as it happens and having access to all of Alex Jones's documentaries. Well, stay with us after the news. We have special reports coming up for our Prison Planet TV subscribers. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
City of Austin tap water versus filtered City of Austin tap water.
I can taste dirt in it.
God knows what's in this.
This has an aftertaste.
Tastes like Austin water? Yeah, it does. Ugh.
These people just sampled City of Austin tap water straight from the faucet. Next, we had them try a sample of tap water filtered with a ProPure G2.0 filtration system.
High quality H2O.
That one is better.
Tastes like nothing.
Yep, I know what good water tastes like. It's good water.
Most tap water contains added substances like fluoride, chlorine, Monsanto's deadly pesticide, glyphosate, and many others. Studies prove that these substances are linked to an assortment of major health issues, including tooth decay, lowered IQ, and even cancer.
It tastes like you're drinking out of the lake when you're drinking tap water.
Yeah, it has that processed flavor to it.
The ProPure G2.0 filtration system removes these deadly substances and many more, leaving only fresh-tasting, deliciously clean water.
Okay, this is very tasty.
It's good water.
Refreshing.
It's good.
Go to InfoWarsStore.com today. Use promo code WATER and save 10% off your ProPure purchase. Again, that's InfoWarsStore.com or call 1-888-253-3139.
Hey guys, Rob Dew from InfoWars.com, and I saw this story last night on DailyMail.com, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. It has to do with the show Breaking Bad and the action figure that they're selling. And what's really weird is that they're selling this at a kid's toy store, Toys R Us. Florida mom demands Toys R Us remove Breaking Bad action figure that comes complete with toy meth. Florida mom is campaigning to have the show's action figures pulled from the store's racks and website, saying its adult themes and depiction of violence and drug abuse aren't suitable for children. Now, if you go to the actual website for Toys R Us and you look up the Breaking Bad 6-inch action figure Heisenberg, shows a picture of him, selling it for $13.99. You go to the product description, and it says, this unforgettable variant edition figure features Walter as his alter ego of Heisenberg. He comes complete with removable hat, removable glasses, a sack of cash, and a bag of blue crystals. Here's a close-up of the bag of blue crystals, and you can see this is what the meth that he was so famous for dealing during the entire series of the show. Incidentally, he was using this to pay for his overpriced cancer treatment that was not covered under his insurance, but that's a whole nother side issue. So there they are equating, hey, you sell drugs, you get a sack of cash to go along with it. But what happens if you get caught distributing these drugs? Well, here it is off criminaldefenselawyer.com. Federal law mandates a prison term even for first convictions of at least 5 years for anyone convicted of possessing 5 grams of meth with the intent to distribute it, and at least 10 years for possessing 50 grams for distribution purposes. You look at that bag that he's carrying, looks like a lot of meth, probably more than 50 grams. And so you're looking at least a 10-year prison sentence if you were to emulate what you saw with this action figure. I'm not saying kids are going to go out and do that, but it's kind of putting it in their heads. This is made for kids 15 and up. So you're still a teenager, you're still under 18. And here it is glorifying drug use, saying you can get a bag of cash